welcome to this fourth episode of 5 in 5. I'm really glad to be introducing to somebody who I've known for a couple of years now, and this lady's really a trailblazer in what she's doing in the sort of talent acquisition and that piece around culture and taking a much more ingrained approach into how she's supporting many channel businesses and she's also very much involved with supporting obviously our partner in this series, which is the channel community. She, like Nebula, she's set up she's a gold supporter as well of the channel community. So yeah, without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to Zoe Chatley, the founder and CEO of the Channel Recruiter. Hi, Zoe.
Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. That was very kind. I like the trailblazer point. I thought, oh, okay, I like that. That's good. No, thank you ever so much for having me. I'm very excited and honoured to be here. So I'm looking forward to answering these questions and having a good chat.
Great. No, thank you for joining us, Zoe. And obviously, you know, a relatively young business still, the Channel Recruiter. I think you formed in, I think it was July 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, you seem to be going from strength to strength.
Yeah, we're doing well. We're snowballing a bit, which is good. We're learning as we go. We're developing like all businesses, but it's been exciting. And yeah, we'll be 4 years old in July this year. So I blinked and that time has gone.
It flies by, doesn't it? Absolutely flies by. And I think, you know, I get a lot of positive comments about what you guys are doing over at the Channel Recruiter. And I think, you know, for the topic today, you know, we've covered a number of interesting topics where we've had social mobility, we've had social value, and sort of just before this podcast, we've had obviously diversity as well. We've touched on, but I think from today's perspective, you know, we're going to touch on there's some overlap with all this, obviously, and but I think where we're talking about culture, talent, and personal branding today, and I've heard you speak about many of these areas before at different events and things. So yeah, I think we're going to touch on a number of things, and I'm going to send out an apology now to the listeners in the sense that the 5 in 5 concept seems to be turning into the 5 in 15, so taking 15 minutes, not 5. But no, I don't think there's any apologies there. I think we've had some really interesting insights from all our speakers and guests. So today we'll do what we can, and it'll be what it'll be. But if without further ado, I'd like to sort of kick on to our first question, if I may.
Absolutely. Go ahead. I'm excited.
Okay, here we go then. Here we go. So I think if we kick off around culture as well, I mean, from your perspective, yeah, how do you define a positive workplace culture with obviously the clients you speak with, and what positive steps can organizations take to foster that type of culture as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. I mean, these are topics that are coming up all the time at the moment. And one of the key things that and as a business, we hear more and more about, you know, companies that maybe don't have a positive workplace culture and those that do. The difference, the fundamental difference between them two is the employees at a culture that maybe isn't working too well is they don't feel listened to. And so therefore communication with your teams and your employees is so crucial. You know, listening to, you know, what they're looking for and what makes it a good place to work. Looking at the individual departments. I did a post on this, I think, last week about listening to the individuals within your business, looking at the teams that you've got working there. Look at the teams that are working really, really well and try and replicate that. So a lot of companies will talk about, you know, fostering a great workplace culture, but actually, you know, it's not just a tick box exercise. Listen to what those individuals are saying to you, those teams, those leaders, and start implementing change. You know, make the changes within the departments that are working really well. You know, if you take a company like Softcat, for example, everybody talks about the soft cat culture, couldn't talk then,
Yeah.
soft cat culture. And the fact that it's a young, a vibrant, a very diverse culture where people feel listened to, they're trained, they're developed, you know, people have been there for years. Well, their retention's really good. And why is their retention good? Because they've got a good culture to work in and a company where they feel valued and listened to. So take those pieces and listen to your employees. And I think if you can do that, you can really foster a great culture and build upon that.
I think that's great. Yeah, great answer and interesting. Just listening to what you had to say there, as using Softcat as an example, right? And I think I was speaking to Rebecca Monk a few months back, and she was saying how, you know, they took the people strategy around sort of fostering their own culture and sort of growing their own. I think the term she
Yes.
referenced in that one as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that you know, we can learn something from that, and they're doing it at scale, right? But obviously
Yes.
that pans down to the SME space as well. So
It
you know, a lot.
massively does. Yeah, hugely. And it's not just in, you know, in sales as well. You know, one of our big partners is XMA, and you know, they obviously do a lot in public sector, a huge amounts of public sector, and therefore have huge departments in their technical service desk areas. Well,
Yeah.
you've got to have a really good workplace culture there because you're recruiting vast amounts, various contracts, and you need the teams to really gel together. And in order to do that, you need to offer really good training and development. You need to listen to your teams, look at the areas that they need that development, and that all builds to a good culture. And they're a prime example of, you know, in service desk in particular, where their offerings and the culture and the environment they're bringing up works really, really well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and I think that dovetails nicely into my next question, which
Mm,
obviously culture's a big aspect, if you like, of giving that workplace that sort of that sort of inclusive and trusted environment
yeah.
to be the best you possibly can, right? And
Mm,
but what other strategies can companies adopt in terms of, you know, we've touched on there really retaining talent, if you like. We've probably
yes.
touched on that around culture and everything else. But what about attracting talent from external sort of audiences into a business? You know,
Yeah.
what can companies do to attract that talent in the first place?
That's such a good question. And I think this is where, you know, I suppose a channel recruitment service or any recruitment service really does play, because we can partner with companies to look at the whole picture. And that picture is their employment brand. What does their employment brand say about them? Because that is what's going to attract good talent into their business. And you have to, you know, there's lots of different things you can look at from an employment brand. You know, what are they doing socially? You know, what's their social media platform like? What sort of message and content are they putting out there? You've got things like Glassdoor. You know, it's a very open platform and it can be a risk in so many ways because, you know, it's very real and raw. You know, positive Glassdoor reviews go up, but also negative Glassdoor reviews go up. But with the negative Glassdoor reviews, what are they doing to make a change to sort of say, okay, well, maybe we didn't handle that particularly well. What can we do to reverse that, change it? You know, it's PR at the end of the day.
Sure.
But you have to look at, from an offerings point of view, how are we perceived? What is our employment brand like? Are we competitive with salaries? You know, how are we benchmarking each department and role and team to make sure we're competitive so we're attractive? But, you know, a lot of candidates these days, they're not just looking at salary, they're looking at the overall career progression within a business, especially the younger generations. So what training and development are they offering? And do they implement that training and development? Lots of companies can say, yeah, we offer staff progression, we offer development and one-to-ones. Do they actually do it? Do they implement it? So when we're prepping candidates who are going into interview, we say to them, interview them as much as they're interviewing you. Make sure you're getting as much out of that process as you can, so you can decide if that is a company that is good that you want to go and work for. So that whole employment brand piece is huge. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer there, but you know,
Yeah.
looking at, as I say, competitive salary, packages, training and development. What are their offerings? What are their DEI initiatives like? And are they enforcing good diversity within their company and their culture? It all wraps in. If you can nail those parts and be competitive, you'll be very attractive, and people will naturally want to go and work there.
I think that's really good advice. And just listening there, I like the example, so the Glassdoor example, and I think, like you say, if companies and external sort of potential new team members are looking at those type of reviews and engaging with those as their sort of, it's a bit like when you look at TripAdvisor before you visit a hotel or a restaurant, right, and that type of thing. But I don't think people mind the honesty, even if it's not a great review, if you respond to that review and if you put practices in place to sort of make that situation a much more positive one, and because everybody makes mistakes, all companies don't get everything right first time, right? But it's back to communication, isn't it, which helps drive that culture. And I think what you touched on as well around diversity as well, I think from a D&I perspective, from your perspective, how can companies ensure that's ingrained into their culture? What's some of the practices they can help sort of, I guess, put more emphasis around diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, and I know this is a topic obviously you've covered in other interviews you've done recently, so I'm conscious of probably any crossover information, but I'm going to sound like a broken record here. It comes down to communication and not being a tick box exercise, because diversity and inclusion is a hugely hot topic, but it's so vital and important for organisations to make sure they really embody DE&I. And I think one of the things that they can do in order to embody it is, again, listening to their team. So having, whether that's round table events, having key individuals or teams or groups of individuals that can feed back internally what's happening. If it's a very male dominated environment, you hear a lot of that in the tech industry. Well, how can we get more women to the organization? Well, employ more women. Look at where you're failing in that area. Disability, are you hiring people with skills in different areas, but also have disabilities? They don't have to be visible disabilities, they can be invisible disabilities. But a lot of people don't necessarily talk about it because they're scared of rejection. But actually that can foster a really positive workplace culture from a DE&I point of view. I think the other thing that they have to be careful of is that superficial stance as well. Like, oh, we really embrace DE&I, but when you dig a little bit deeper, do they? So again, you need to take a hard look at your business and look at the areas where you can make improvements to DE&I, listen to the teams around you, and actually go out to recruit a more diverse culture and embrace it as well. There's so much talent on the market that are missed out because people aren't embracing a diverse work culture. They're not getting more mums back into business and into work. They're not, their businesses might not be suitable for somebody that's got a disability. So make it suitable, make changes that do it. And I think if you can do that, it will help build a stronger workforce culture, because you have people that are from different ethnicities, from backgrounds, social mobility, etc. So like I said, don't do it as just a tick box exercise. Actually embrace it and implement more than anything else.
I think that's really good advice. And like you say, I think the piece around obviously diversity and equity and inclusion is we're seeing more and more pressures put on those departments and those roles, aren't we, in the sense that we've seen in the press over the last 3 to 4 months people losing their jobs in those type of roles, and because it's seen as a cost to a business as things are getting more sort of challenging, and that feels like in some regards we're taking a step backwards, and actually this should be looked at and ingrained as a much more longer term strategy for your people, right? Because
absolutely.
we know a diverse workplace is one that's
Mm.
going to thrive around innovation, and there's new
Yeah,
ideas, there's different perspectives,
yeah.
and that, yeah, that does turn into purpose, it does turn into profits and everything else. But
Mm.
you've got to take a much longer term pragmatic view of those things, which obviously some businesses don't, but those that do, I think, will really shine sort of more long term. So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
I think we sort of, yeah, there's some really good insights there in terms of what companies should be doing,
Yeah.
and obviously, yeah, we could talk about that all day probably,
Oh,
and
so
everything else.
much. Yeah,
But
it's yeah, you just
it,
need little nuggets here and there of just things that you can do that will make a difference.
absolutely, absolutely, and so if I flip it more
Mm.
from sort of team members' perspective,
Mm-mm.
obviously, you know, with social media and things being so prevalent in sort of society now, and
Mm.
obviously both from a personal and professional perspective, yeah, why all of a sudden we keep hearing about this sort of personal branding aspect, and you
Yeah.
know, from your perspective, why do you believe it's so important to embrace personal branding and to have a more sort of conscious, pragmatic approach to that from an individual perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you've got so many different social media platforms at the moment, I mean, you look at Meta and Instagram. I don't know about you, but I see a lot of superficial fakeness out in the market.
Yeah,
When you compare Instagram to somewhere like LinkedIn,
yeah,
LinkedIn is obviously for business professionals. It's a business networking platform,
yeah,
but both of them, both I suppose, require an element of you being your own personal brand.
yeah,
A lot of businesses, some businesses don't like people to have a personal brand because they think, oh, it won't reflect well on our business. But actually, it does the opposite. If you've got somebody who's really good at building their own personal brand that get themselves out there for being themselves, their authentic self, you will naturally win business, gain
yeah,
attraction, market the business, even if it's just them because they work for your business.
yeah,
It will all have a positive impact. It's going to add value to your business because that person's really, putting themselves out there. When I think back to when I first started the channel recruiter, I remember doing my first video and putting myself out there, and
yeah,
I cringed, and I
yeah,
think I just did it from I was working in my kitchen at the time. Obviously, we don't have an office at the moment, and I put myself out there, and I thought this is how I'm going to build the channel recruiter, by putting myself out there. And it's the same for anybody putting themselves out to build a good platform for yourself, for your business, to win new contracts and business partnerships, to market the company. You need to build your own personal brand. You need to be
yeah.
your most authentic self, and sometimes that's really scary.
Yes, yeah,
But
yeah,
if you do it well and you embrace what yourself and everything you offer, it can actually have a really good impact on yourself in terms of building your network, but
yeah.
also for the business that you work for as well. I think that was probably quite a
Yeah.
long-winded answer to that.
No, no, no. I think I'm smiling to myself because I do remember your kitchen videos, and I do miss them. So I'm hoping they come back at some point. So
I
so,
know. Well, yeah. Now
but
you just get the channel recruiter, background
I
here
know, I
at the
know.
moment.
We've all
So
conformed to it, haven't we? And
we
but
have.
no, I think that was a, yeah. I think that's when you and I first started engaging from that time in the early days of the channel recruit. And yeah,
Mm,
I think like you said, putting your authentic self out there is quite nerve-wracking sometimes. And yeah, we talk on the channel community about sort of having a safe and trusted environment for people to
yes.
be themselves, and we are
Mm,
seeing that change with every event we get involved with, as
yes.
you've been involved with. But yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? Because yeah, personal branding really does align to, I think, people, because they want a sense of belonging within a business
Mm,
they work for now, or they work
yes.
within, let's say, rather than work
Yeah.
for. That sense of belonging and the personal brand aspects, they almost want to, I'm seeing more and more that the values of the business need to represent the values of the individual, and the two are like magnetic forces coming together, aren't there? And I think, yeah, my fifth and final question, I guess, is still around personal brand.
Yes.
But obviously there's some really good advice you gave there in terms of how people can build their own personal brand.
Yes.
But how do they integrate and dovetail that in with the company they work for? So let's assume, you know, that their values are aligned in terms of the person and the company that they're working with. What can they get involved with to help sort of promote that as a more of a collaboration, if you like, of that, to sort of supercharge that personal brand and the company brand at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think I suppose there's a couple of ways you can look at it. You know, look at what the business stands for and what you stand for. So like you said, values. Look at the service offerings and how your values and the company values integrate into the service offerings that the business does. So for from a talent attraction point of view, you know, when we're hiring people, we're also working very closely with customers. So we need to make sure that, the message that we put out to market as individuals resonates with people watching our videos. So, you know, if we're talking about, company culture, diversity, and attracting people to their business to build their employment brand, all the content that we're putting out as individuals and as a business has to be in sync with each other. And you only get that when those two values align. You know, if a company's values and the individual that works these values aren't there, the messages and the content that we're putting out will be completely mismatched. Whereas when they align really, really well, you're going to get people that will naturally, it will resonate with them, it will click with them. So when they're watching that content and think, oh, okay, I really agree with what they're saying here. Well, what's the business they work for? Oh, they work for that company. Oh, and this is what they offer. And then it all starts sort of, clicking in and working together. So I think you have to watch everything very, very closely. I think you need to be able to, like I said, ensure that the values of both the individual and the company are aligned, and then ensure that the content that you're popping out is authentic. It's not scripted in any way. You can tell, if you put a post out on LinkedIn, you can tell the ones that have been written by an individual and those that have had AI do the work for them. And it's not real. So I think you have to be very, very real. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm an advocate of AI, but it's not authentic. It doesn't sound like the person. It doesn't sound like the company. We've got a great digital marketing business that do a lot of our company posts out on LinkedIn, but we sign off everything that gets put out. We make sure that it's aligned with our company values, that as individuals, all the guys that work for us, we're all pumping out the same content or similar so that it all matches. And I think that's how businesses and individuals can really make sure that they're properly aligned to each other, marketing themselves well, marketing the company well, and being very true to themselves. If that all makes sense?
Absolutely. And I'm just, as I'm listening to what you have to say there, I absolutely agree. I think where we fall down sometimes is, obviously my role within marketing is, I've always worked closely with the HR team, for example, because if the people strategy needs to be aligned to the marketing communication strategy, right? And content needs to be consistent with some of the key themes, so people can still share a view they have on a particular theme, but let's ensure we're sort of, again, supercharging a specific theme that company and the individuals want to talk about, right? And then you find your sort of advocates and ambassadors within different areas of the business who, one might be driving sustainability, another one might be DE&I, another one might be around sort of outreach programs. Whatever those things are, our job is almost as a conductor in those senior roles, is to align them.
Market. Absolutely. I mean, Well, I've hired quite a lot of social media, so social media managers or executives, and some of those roles are actually based within HR teams, because the crossover between, like you said, marketing and HR, it runs so closely. So when you're looking at just attracting, individuals to the business, you need somebody that can pump out the right content. So they need to be working really closely with HR to make sure that, from an employee relations and employee branding point of view, the message to market works really well, and that marketing can support those strategies. So it's interesting because, like I said, we're getting a lot of those types of vacancies at the moment, and they literally sit side by side with HR, side by side with marketing, to make sure it's all aligned. And it's clever strategy. It's really, really clever. So it'd be interesting, I think, moving forward now to see how many people can, listen to this and go, oh yeah, actually, our social media teams are working closely with our HR and our marketing teams and so on and so forth, to make sure that message to market is all in sync.
Yeah, no, great advice, and absolutely agree with that. And I think we have probably become the 5 in 15, if not 5 in 20 on this one. But so it feels like we've just, don't apologise. It feels like we're just skimming the surface, and I think we've touched on obviously culture, talent, and personal branding. And I know that they're not siloed entities; they're all interlinked as well, obviously, as you've touched on there. So yeah, I think we need another podcast, probably another 3 podcasts where we delve deeper right into those things. But I'd like to thank you for your time as always, Zoe. Thank you for taking the time out to share your insights and your views, and really interesting. So yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for having me, Richard. It's a pleasure, as always, to speak with you, and I hope that people enjoy what they hear today and can take something from it, of course.